All right, let's just make sure we're alive. It looks like we're alive. Looks like the internet has given us another day to do our thing. And I am so happy about that, right? Yes, all right. You know me, I don't leave anything to chance. I need to see it. And then once I see it, I am okay. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good evening, good day, good future. If you're in Australia, how's the future? Did we make it another day? If you're in Chicago, everything okay? Apparently, there was a big storm. I saw some pictures from some of my friends. There were a bunch of trees knocked over. Is everything okay out there? Let me know. Hope you're doing well. Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. Get some of it wholesale. You can get their tea wholesale now during the pandemic. They supply the tea to this show, and they got excellent black teas. They got this amazing smoky black tea from China. It's absolutely amazing. They got good green teas if it's the afternoon. You want to do a relaxing green tea. And they got a raspberry pecan. That's my personal favorite. So ZT.com, ZHITEA.com, triageoil.com, triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. They make topical pain oil that you rub on your joints, you rub on your body. It works wonders. It's done wonders for my neck, and it works a lot on sunburns. It's summer. If you get a sunburn, this topical oil works incredibly well. And it smells nice, too. Thank you very much, Triage, for the recent care package, and the guitar picks were a very nice touch. You might be asking, Ron, what about the CBD oil that you take, that you ingest, that you can consume? Do you got me covered? Yes, I do. RareNaturalsCBD.com. That's with an S, RareNaturalsCBD.com. They make the type of oil that you can put in your drink. You can put it underneath your tongue. It's great after a workout to kind of just relax yourself. It's really great if you feel a headache coming on. That's what I do. If I feel a headache coming on, I put a couple drops of the CBD oil in my water. I drink it, and it really helps. It just soothes you. It works wonders. RareNaturalsCBD.com. If you want to stock up on your CBD oil, here's the best part. Use the promo code Lucy at checkout, Lucy, Lucy at checkout, and you get 30% off. That's RareNaturalsCBD.com. Promo code Lucy for 30% off. And last but certainly not least, I want to give a shout out to Mayday Books out in Minneapolis. Lots of love to Minneapolis and Mayday Books. You sent me a nice little note in the mail, and I appreciate that very much. So shout out to Mayday Books. Please do show them some love if you're in the Minneapolis area. All right, without further ado, I'm going to bring my guest in today. So this is a progressive and an activist, and she's running for mayor out in Portland. Please welcome to the show, Sarah Iannarone. Sarah, how are you?
How are you? It's good to be here. And yes, I am a progressive. They call you an activist when you're a progressive that they don't want to see in office. You don't get to be your profession, right? We're
That's
always
true.
activists when we're working on things like social justice and climate change.
That's the truth. That's the truth. But you've been on the ground a lot too in Portland as well.
A
So
necessity, though. I mean, look at it. How are you feeling about what's going on here? I mean, I'm out there with the deans of colleges and teachers, and we've got the wall of vets and the wall of moms. I mean, just about every single Portlander that I can think of, with few exceptions, is mobilized against hatred, bigotry, and really working in support of Black Lives Matter, regardless of their specific approach to the topic. So this is a pretty exciting, if highly contentious time in our city.
yeah. Well, it's it's quite a contentious time everywhere. It's just, yeah. You're like, well, how are you feeling about all this? Like, I wonder what it's like for people that wake up and just go, everything's fine.
Who is anybody doing that right now?
I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to find them.
Yeah, it's definitely not in ours. I mean, my team, we started campaigning last year. And then right when we were getting ready to deploy our ground game, knocking on about 30,000 doors, we were leading on shelter in place orders due to COVID, just because we were heeding the science, right? So we had to pivot our entire campaign to all virtual. And then on top of that, in the general election now, you have this civil rights uprising in which we have half of our team stays up half the night watching the protests via whatever live stream, and a good portion of them are out there. A lot of my staff have to schedule around their protest duty. We have a stash of tear gas masks and safety goggles and safety helmets and arm pads in the office, along with
Is it
saline and eye wipes. It's just this most bizarre reality right now.
wasn't that incredible that that's like considered campaign gear? You know,
I mean,
where it's just like instead of just a
up.
clipboard and some signs, you're like, get the tear gas mask and get the arm pads and get. I mean, what a time we're living in.
This
It's
is why. So I don't know who's sleeping normally or doing business normally. Business as usual is gone, and here we are. Here we are.
Are you having this thing? And we're going to talk more about Portland, you know, in the second part of the interview. First, we're going to go over a couple stories of the day that I wanted to share with you. I always kind of compile stories that I think are applicable to my guests. So I've picked out a couple for you that I thought you would like, and then we're going to talk specifically about Portland and about your campaign. But let me ask you this real quick before we jump into news: Are you, when you wake up now in the morning, are you just up?
Sleep is elusive when you're campaigning the way that I'm campaigning. So yeah, we stay up as late as we can every night, working as hard as we can, and then we get up as early as we can
Mm-hmm.
every single day. And I have to force myself and my team to take time off actually for our health, our physical and mental health, making sure people are taking at least half days off and full days off periodically for self-care. But yeah, I mean, every day there's only so many hours of the day and there's so much work to do. I have to reach hundreds of thousands of voters who've not yet heard my name, but who have intense dissatisfaction with the status quo, and figure out a way to communicate with them that investing in a progressive future, investing in a Green New Deal, divesting from militarization is actually the safe bet. There's not a lot of narrative around there that these transformative policies are actually truly the safe option, right? So
Mm-hmm.
getting that message out in the next whatever 90, I think it's less than 90 days now, is my greatest challenge.
So let's hit some news, and then we're going to get back to everything that you got going on. So this is breaking. Democracy Now! Publishes today: Russia approves the first COVID vaccine. Now New Zealand goes back into lockdown. Just to show you on some of the stuff going on in the world. In international news, this is from the article, the number of global coronavirus cases has surpassed 20 million. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced Russia is the first country to approve a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, he's even stating that his daughter has already received it. The regulatory approval was granted as the vaccine is still going through clinical trials. So that's a little weird, like it's still going through trials, but it's approved. Now, here's what happened in New Zealand. This is interesting. In New Zealand, they've ordered the city of Auckland into lockdown and for other measures to be renewed in the rest of the country after 4 people from one Auckland family contracted COVID-19. Now, here's the interesting part. This comes just 2 days after New Zealand celebrated 100 days without a domestic transition. Doesn't that kind of put things into an interesting perspective for you? Here you have a country that went 100 days without a case. 100 days. They get 4 of them. They're back on lockdown.
Well, when you think about the fact that New Zealand and Oregon have roughly the same population, but we're not bound, we don't have that boundary of water around us, it makes you wonder what would be possible with bold leadership trying to contain this crisis, right? I mean, the United States is failing miserably, and from all of the briefings that I'm getting, Oregon is right around middling in terms of how we're dealing with this. Some places are doing better, some places are doing worse. But I think the biggest tension has always been, and something that I'm always proud of Jacinda Ardern for doing, whether it was gun safety or climate justice or now COVID, is she just puts the health and safety of her people first and trusts that if she does that, then the economy will follow. She's really leading from a compassionate model. And I think that more policymakers who do that and weren't reactionary toward the business case around some of this policymaking, and if they followed the science, we would be pulling out of this so much faster, and our kids could get back to school and our people could get back to work. But it's all this equivocating and letting the politics of the large business interest undermine science is really what is handicapping us, I think,
Oh,
as a
big time.
society.
And you know what the craziest part is of all that is that now, even that pro business, I mean, there's even people in the Fed now that are saying, look, we'd be better off just locking down for another 6 weeks so we don't have to kind of reopen and then kind of close again and then kind of reopen and then kind of close again. So even these, pro business capitalists, whatever you want to call it, even they're now saying, let's just lock down and handle this thing right. Let's not screw up a second time.
Oh, and academics. I mean, my friends who are epidemiologists and virologists are just banging their heads against the wall going, come on, we've given you the roadmap and it's got a timeline and but we haven't invested from day one. I mean, when you think about the things that you have to do, you look at the Vietnam case, a lot of people look at New Zealand. Well, that's a very moderately sized nation with
Sure.
clear pro-social, they got clear pro-social activities that go on as well. But you look at someplace like Vietnam, and it's clear where their population of 95 million people, that's bound up with investments, intensified investments over generations in public health and clinic scale public health and community-based public health and neighborhood outreach, and making sure that folks could quarantine at home safely and have the food they need and the medicine they need and the resources they need. And boy, what a case is Vietnam in all of this too. I mean, we're underestimating what it means to make critical investments in community health infrastructure as part of your national safety model. Right? We spend all our money on the military and it doesn't really keep us safe from things like this. And think about if we're investing billions in neighborhood and community health, how resilient and healthy our people and vibrant our economy would be in that case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the piece so many people are missing. And yet you still, at the very top, you still will not hear conversations about Medicare for all, about making sure everyone has health care. It's still something that you just don't say.
I'm getting to the point where I don't really think these should be ideological arguments, and I don't get that. Postal Service, perfect example. The post office works. It just works. It's not a for-profit business. We don't need to monetize it. We don't even need to market it. We just need to keep it healthy, steward it, and it will serve us. Like, it's not anathema. The right wing and the neocons have so hijacked practicality for their own ends that we can't even have something as basic as mail.
Yeah. Well, I actually tweeted that exact thing. I was just like, hey guys, I don't know if you noticed, it's actually called the Postal Service, not the Postal Business, the Postal Service. Service right in the freaking name. It's right there, right in the name. Postal Service. What does that mean? It provides a service where for a low cost, you get to send mail all over the country and all over the world. And it works and it's efficient. And, that money that it expends, that money that it spends, a lot of that is on salaries of who? Other American citizens who go out and spend money in the economy. That's how a service works. It's mind boggling. It really is. And yeah, that's just the constant attack on the post office is just such a, calling it backwards is an understatement. It's just ridiculousness. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
And when you look at how, neoliberalism has somehow managed over half a century of wearing down people's commitment to understanding that a government run well and a government in the interest of people can actually make your economy better. It's because they're trying to scrape value off our communities without actually investing in them. And this is not the product of a U.S. endeavor. This is a multinational, transnational corporations that want to operate above regulation. They want to operate above taxation. And I don't know why Americans buy into it. Like, whatever happened to caring about investments in our communities and caring about investments in our people and making sure our people had good jobs? To me, that should be something that, like, the people who claim to support Trump right now, I would think they would be behind that. So I don't really even understand a lot of where they're coming from on their policy, frankly.
No, I see. Yeah, I agree completely. And I think, have you ever read the book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam?
Oh yeah, Putnam back in the day. I've met Robert before.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
cool. I mean, that book really kind of laid out like just slowly how we kind of lost our sense of community, and like he laid out like a variety of things how it happened. It's been almost a decade since I've really read that book, but I think like there's still that glaring question of how exactly did we lose our sense of community? How exactly did we lose our sense of trying to do something in our community? And I also I also feel like a lot of the older generations, like my parents' generation and stuff like that, I think that they mistake the goodness of their community for other things. And they kind of like they're kind of holding on to this like goodness of community that they're giving other entities credit for. Um, and I don't know why that is. Like that's something I feel like that's a really heavy like societal question that if somebody ever finds the fix for that, we'll start transforming our society for the better.
Well, you know, Portland was the outlier case in Robert's research there, in terms of Portland was bucking the trend, and we had increasing rates of civic engagement even when other places were experiencing a decline. And what that was the product of actually investing in civic infrastructure. Community engagement and participatory democracy is so central here to how we conduct business. And so, what we're seeing now on the ground in Portland is a bit of a boomeranging, if you will, where folks who benefited from that for so long, namely white single family homeowners, are facing the challenges of what that new inclusive governance model looks like in an increasingly pluralist society comprised of non-majority white renters, right? People who are working in different industries or remote working or working not in manufacturing jobs or service or caring jobs. I mean, what we're seeing is so many social disruptions. And so the things that have been working historically here, we need to make sure that they're keeping up to speed with the social changes that we see going on all around us. There's a lot of that tension on the ground here in Portland. It's why progressive leadership, I think, is so essential in a city like ours, so that we continue to serve as a model for other places where if you do invest in local business and you do invest in affordable housing and you do invest in mass transit and you do invest in community infrastructure like municipal broadband or community energy, and then you pay those dividends back into community funds, that you'll actually be one of the more prosperous cities in the world. And then other places can look at us and say, well, it worked in Portland. And make sure that we're staying on top in our leadership position. But we've really faltered since Robert did that book. I think that's getting pretty old now, maybe 10.
Yeah, I forget the publication date on that. I just know like when I was in grad school, I referred to it a lot. So I haven't really like used that book a lot since like it's been like again almost a decade. So it's not like I don't remember the Portland part, for instance, but yeah, I do remember like there was a lot in that book that just kind of illuminated a lot of the topics that we've been discussing. So I actually have a municipal broadband story for you coming up, but
By
yes.
the way, that book was published in 2000, so it's almost 20 years old.
Okay, cool.
I feel really old now. Oh my goodness, I'm an old lady.
Well, do you think Portland's still the outlier?
Well, I don't know. Look at the news and you tell me. I mean, a lot of that civic engagement and that civic capital is why you have that social capital, as Putnam would call it, is why you have people still out in the streets 70 days later. Like our commitment to democracy is fierce here, and they are resisting authoritarianism. The problem is that our leaders are more neoliberal. They're progressive, I call them right now. They dress up like they're progressive and they use the right language. But when it comes to what they resist and what they support, they really do kind of adopt the business case and don't take the pro-social case a lot. So there are tensions, but I do think it needs some updating, like I said, for cultural pluralism, where, Portland was largely led by white single family homeowners since Europeans colonized the place. So we have to think about what Portland's going to look like to have strong social capital in a very diverse, rapidly changing, and hopefully not too gentrifying. We need to put the brakes on gentrification if we're hoping to wrap our arms around any of this that we need for the future.
So Speaking of progressives and neoliberals, one of the things that I had to mention today, because it just dropped in the blogosphere, and then we got a municipal broadband story after that, and then we're going to talk heavy Portland. But first, they announced the lineup for the DNC convention. Sarah, this is real exciting stuff. This is like, it's almost like if you were booking a music festival, but your objective was to make everybody cry, you would come up with this awesome lineup. Check this out. So Monday they got Bernie Sanders, which, they put Bernie up as far away from Joe Biden as they could, which is interesting. And then here's the lineup for Monday. It includes Cuomo, Gretchen Whitmer, Jim Clyburn, John Kasich. There's that wide tent, or however they put it. John Kasich, he's speaking. Doug Jones, that's the guy who was so inspirational he barely beat a pedophile, if you remember that guy. Then on Tuesday, we got Sally Yates, Chuck Schumer, that'll be a doozy. John Kerry, the guy who couldn't beat George W. Bush. Let's hear what he has to say. AOC, here we go. Bill Clinton, Jill Biden, because, the Democratic Party's evolving. That's why they have names like that. Bill Clinton, still got to hear from him. Wednesday, Pelosi. That's going to be, there we go. Hillary Clinton, Liz Warren, Tony Evers, Gabrielle Giffords, and Barack Obama speaking. Again, like all the people they highlight, it's just like, oh, yeah, this thing's changing. Joe Biden, the Clintons, the Obamas. Let's see. Thursday, Cory Booker, Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, Tammy Baldwin, Tammy Duckworth, Chris Coons, Kamala Harris, Biden family, Vice President Joe Biden. They're letting Biden headline. I don't know how I feel about that, but he's got the headlining spot. I guess that's the way they got to do it. I personally would rather see a battle of the bands or something if I had to choose.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting here I think Multnomah County, where I live, went 98% for Obama, right, when he ran for office. So we have nonpartisan local elections here. Everybody's a Democrat, and it's more what shade of blue are you? And a lot of us are virgin to green. I'm a lot more green even than I am blue when it comes right down to it. But we have nonpartisan local elections. One of the things that we're seeing is the tension between the establishment, which is largely corporate-backed, and people like, say, the Squad, who represent the new face of America. And I would love to see the establishment recognize the power of this new movement, these youth, these younger leaders, these more diverse leaders, these women leaders who are saying status quo is not working. And the longer that you keep trying to tell us that these non-threatening choices are our pathway to a sustainable future, the longer it's going to take us to actually be sustainable. And it really does seem to be a blind spot, but I can only guess that it's a corporatization, right? And how these elections are funded and how these parties are funded that's really driving this.
Yeah, see, I would say it's more sinister than that even, because I think, yeah, the funding is the big problem. And I think as a result of that, you kind of have an entity whose first priority is not winning and whose first priority is certainly not appeasing the base. 80% of the Democratic base, which means, the voters, the people who aren't Republicans, basically, they want stuff like single payer Medicare for all. They want a Green New Deal. They want free college. They want all these things. Yet the powers that be will not allow it to happen. Why? Well, because the donors don't approve of that. And so I really think the first priority is making sure the donors are happy, making sure the status quo doesn't shift at all. And if you can maintain all that and beat a Republican or two in the process, great. If you can't, well, the gravy train keeps rolling, so no big deal. As long as you occasionally win here and there, just so the facade's kept up, cool. If not, well, oh well. I mean, I really think it is... after 2016, for me personally, all of my greatest, basically all of my worst suspicions about the Democratic Party were just proven true. Like all of my worst, like all of the I don't know about this, but they're not the Republicans. But all of my worst suspicions were proven true. Where it's like, yes, this is an institution that would rather have John Kasich be part of it than Nina Turner.
Well, I mean, for me, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a publicly financed candidate. And
Hmm.
it has completely shifted the ground on which I campaign. And it's pulled the rug out from underneath my opponent because there are two policies that came online at the same time that are changing the rules of engagement altogether. And it's really bringing home for me what campaign finance reform could do for this country in terms of our politics, apart from the cult of personality and popularity contest that we talk about in terms of pop culture. Like AOC has managed to walk that line by engaging a whole new set of younger voters and getting people into interested in politics and engaged in politics. But my campaign, because I do not have to take checks from, and frankly cannot take checks from, the same 400 people who've essentially been electing mayors downtown Portland as long as we've been electing mayors. Suddenly I don't have to pick up the phone for them if I don't want to. And sure, I will take a donation from them. My campaign contribution cap in this race is $250 per individual, no
Right.
PACs, no corporations, not even off your small business. You can't write me that. So it's not like I'm like, I won't take your money, but also my next door neighbor who's the firefighter, my next door neighbor who's the school teacher, my next door neighbor who works at the hospital, they all wrote me a check for $250 too. So do you want to come to the table and be a part of this community and have this conversation? Because you don't get to drive this conversation anymore. And it's also meaning that a larger swath of people are getting to have their voice represented in me so that as I'm campaigning, I get to say the truth and I don't have to take that safe line that's going to keep the downtown business establishment happy because we know that their model's not working.
Yeah.
Right. So it's been this empowering thing where me being able to go to a street newspaper vendor and say, hey, man, I need your $5 because it helps me qualify for public financing. Like, can you give me this $5? I know you're unemployed. I know you're homeless, but do you have a 5 spot for me? And them saying, OK, I'm going to give you this 5 is like other people used to go and try and get a $5,000 or $10,000 check from a downtown developer. And it upends the power structure in our city. So when I'm elected, the people who are going to have that open door to my office are the folks who are on the ground at the grassroots crafting policy that's like edgy and viable because they're living those lives. And I think it's going to be pretty transformative. It's the least sexy part of my campaign. We've got a lot of amazing policies, but this one, it's just a game changer.
Well, yeah, and also you're going local, which is like, as you've kind of hinted, so much more transparent. I'm certainly not naive enough to say there's no corruption on the local level too. Of course there is, but you can, when you put together the right ground game, there's just so much it's easier to combat. It's easier to fight back, and you're kind of proving that on the ground. So we're going to dive into the real nitty-gritty, but first, an issue that we are both very passionate about. In fact, that was how I initially heard of you, because I talk about municipal broadband a lot too, and I know it's a big part of what you're doing. So I got a broadband update for you. You may have already seen this, but something's going on kind of near me in Southern California. California South Bay cities finish a fiber network, and now they're looking to smart application. A group of 15 cities in Los Angeles County, California, they're closing in on the competition of the South Bay Fiber Network. Now, this is a public-private partnership with American Dark Fiber. And this is according to a Redondo Beach council member. Here's what they said in the press release. The SBFN will allow us to serve all of our residents better and improve their quality of life on so many levels, including real-time transportation, traffic control, connectivity. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven to any doubters that access to affordable and reliable high-speed internet is even more important, as it will allow the increasing number of city workers and local residents to efficiently work from home. So it looks like they're trying to connect the cities, they're trying to get some hotspots, and then eventually they're going to go straight to the home. So that's something that's going on kind of close to me. I live in the Los Angeles area. And of course, this story is from muninetworks.org, which if you want to keep up on what's going on in the world of municipal broadband, which for anyone who's newer to the show, that basically means city and municipal owned internet, where where your internet is just a utility. This is one of the best resources for it. And I know that Portland has had a lot of municipal broadband efforts as well.
I mean, we are just at the beginning. We're working on it. One of the most effective ones has been in a smaller town down the Columbia River called Sandy, Oregon.
Yep.
But really, I'm thinking about this more systemically in terms of community infrastructure investments writ large. Because right now, what we're facing is these intersecting crises, right? We've got COVID and we've got the digital divide, and our families and our workers. Like, I had to go upgrade for my campaign just so that I could be able to do interviews like this with you. And I'm paying, several, I think maybe $50 or $75 additional just for the boost to have the high speed out of my home now. And think of all the workers who are having to do that. You add the families who don't have access to broadband, who are sitting around school bus hotspots or Starbucks with the passwords in the parking lot trying to get their kids access to education, right?
Well, and let me add something to that real quick. The really scary thing there, too, is that there are still a lot of areas in this country where big cable has a monopoly.
Yeah.
So if somewhere like Comcast, in fact, a part of Philadelphia was dealing with this, if Comcast decides they don't want to build a hotspot or they don't want to allow a hotspot in the certain area, these kids don't have access to the internet
Yeah.
where their
Okay.
school currently is. Their
Yeah.
school is on the internet and they don't have access to it. And Comcast, some big cable company whose only concern is profit, gets to decide that. That's
Yeah.
absolutely insane.
Yeah. And so you think about it from the equity issue, you think about it from the access issue and workforce and economic development and jobs. But then you also think about it as investment, right? Why should it be the Comcast Corporation or, a handful of others, these multinational IT corps that want to then take all the profit off our community? If everybody in this town is writing checks every month, well, maybe those dividends should be accruing here. Like, let's make that infrastructure investment ourselves and accrue those dividends to our people so that they're not scraped off again into the pockets of these multinational corporations. If this wasn't good business, they wouldn't be in it. So I don't know why cities are so reticent to be in this. And it's the same with community energy. As we look at that managed decline of the fossil fuel industry and how we transition those workers out of the fossil fuel jobs into green energy jobs and clean jobs, well, there's a lot of investments we can be making where we're paying ourselves and paying back ourselves for investments that we've made that are gonna accrue dividends for us in the long term as a city and as a county and region here in Portland, I think.
Well, so why do you think well, first of all, let me ask you this. Do you feel like the municipal broadband movement has grown some as a result of this pandemic?
Oh,
And
totally. Totally.
I agree. What do you think, though? What do you think it's going to take to really catch on nationally? I mean, people are obviously interested in this stuff because you look at, when net neutrality is front and center, when it's actually talked about and a lot of people know what's going on, when we were first rallying for net neutrality to get it solid on the books back during the Obama years, so many people commented they crashed the FCC's website. When these issues are highlighted, people do care. They understand what's at stake. But, a lot of times it's not talked about, or a lot of times you don't, especially when you have a major news network that's owned by Comcast, you're not going to get an honest story about net neutrality there. It's just not going to happen. So, like, what do you think it's going to take for, like, the country to really understand what this is, what it does, and what the potential is?
Well, again, not to harp too much on public financing, but I can't take a single check from Comcast. And think about all the lobbying you can look at our current mayor's calendar right now and see how many meetings he takes with Comcast, even as the 5G issue has been out front. That, you've got,
Really?
yeah, you can look at if you're a lobbyist, you have to declare. And they're looking at the takeover basically of the commons, trying to put their private infrastructure onto community owned infrastructure, telephone poles, right? Transit. My transit agency here in Portland has to deal with this. And we're not, it's a takings away from municipalities, and the FCC is basically letting them do that. And so when we look then at what it takes to resist these forces, to buck these trends and go a different direction, that independence in campaign financing is key. But I also think one of the reasons that I work at the municipal level and why I love cities so much and why I love a city the scale of Portland and with the aspirations and the grand vision of Portland is that we can make things happen here, and then we serve as a model for the rest of the world. So whether or not, I don't think that these movements are going to catch like brush fire and take over across the United States. I can see it working very well in Portland, and then it being taken up by Wellington, New Zealand, and then being taken up right, by places where you've got things happening because cities are talking, cities are in networks. Progressive cities are looking at solutions for their people. And if you can make a run of it in Portland or other cities like that, then people will say, well, they did it there, so we might as well try it. For me, my career the past 10 years has been working in best practices brokerage with cities around the world, because people came to Portland because they heard something was going on here. Great. And what I've been able to do is cultivate a network of those city leaders, and what we can be on speed dial with each other. Auckland, New Zealand, when it comes to their transit investments, right? Sydney, Australia, when they're thinking about bicycle infrastructure, and say, hey, what worked, what didn't, and like, let's tweak these as we move these from city to city. And I actually see the cities themselves as the way that these initiatives take off. Would it be great if federal governments were helping? Yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, the feds have left the building. If they want to come back in, that's going to be great. But I haven't seen a federal urban policy since probably Jimmy Carter in the United States of America. So cities are largely on their own, I feel like.
Well, yeah, and that's why, it was really refreshing when somebody introduced me to you, because it was just, if electoral politics is going to be your vehicle, I mean, I've said it to so many people, I really wish more people would act locally. Mayor, school board, city council. Like, I'm like, look, if every single city council had a Shamazouant or a couple Shamazouants, we'd have a different country pretty quickly, because, every neighborhood adds up. And, and bringing it back to municipal broadband before we get into the larger thing, one thing that you do see is when somebody nearby gets it, other communities want it. Pretty much the most municipal broadband projects right now, or one of the most in the entire country, is Tennessee. Why is that? You and I both know why that is. Chattanooga. They were one of the earlier adopters of it. They built this amazing network because of the grid. And right now they have some of the best internet in the world, not just in the country, in the world. And it's city owned. And they find out that they pay less for it than, I guarantee they pay less for their internet than you and I both do. Because like yourself, I need to have a business account too to be able to do this stuff. But they just get this amazing internet at an amazing price. I had a friend of mine who I was going to try to get on this show to talk about it. She made a post on Facebook. She left LA and she went back to her hometown of Kentucky. And she decided to stay there for a while until this thing blows over. One of the reasons she decided to stay there is she goes, me and my boyfriend are both working from home, and our internet's amazing here, and it's $50 a month. She has municipal broadband, and I looked it up. Her town has municipal broadband. I don't even know if she realized that or not. She might, I'm not sure. But it's like her town has municipal broadband. So people that have it realize how awesome it is. And then other places want to get it. And it does kind of, I'm always hesitant to use the spread like wildfire analogy just because I live in Southern California. That's a bad analogy to make here. But people, when they see it, they want it. And that's why I get particularly excited here in Southern California, because it's like, look, until recently, we were the capital of show business. We might become that again. I don't know. Who knows? But, once like a major part of the Southern California, Los Angeles area gets it, everybody's going to want it, because every studio is going to want the best internet possible, of course, especially in the digital landscape we live in. And, I'm just hoping that it really spreads. There was that study in Harvard that revealed every time a city does their own project, people get better internet at a better price. It's a no-brainer.
Economic impacts. If I've got people who now have locally owned firms that can put in the infrastructure, that can do the systems maintenance, the tech support, those are jobs. Those are my jobs.
Yes.
Those, I get to create those jobs. That's good for my economy. That's good for my reelection, right? Like, I want to be that person who gets to not have those talking points stolen by neocons, because I want to create good jobs in my place. I want those are good family wage jobs.
So when you're elected mayor, what is kind of like your ground game on getting municipal broadband?
So what I'm going to do is build it into my COVID recovery, and I want to do it.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. I want to build it into the COVID recovery in the first 100 days. I mean, I want to take advantage of that cheap money out of the feds, and I want to do a lot of public works projects. I want to transform some of my parks and community centers that are being shuttered right now due to COVID and budget cuts, and really think about what does a resilient community look like bouncing back from COVID? You know, we're looking at mass transportation. You talk about municipal broadband, and transportation is another place where people have come to Portland and they hop on one transportation mode to the other, to our bike share, to, you know, streetcar, to light rail, a bus, and they're like, this is so effortless. Why doesn't everyone choose to live like this? Making sure that the good life accrues to your people should be part of our COVID recovery. And we can make those investments for our future, because why not? Why wouldn't we be investing in that stuff at this time? We need to put people back to work. We need to be making these public infrastructure investments. And it's time for us to think about a new progressive era. We're leaving this second Gilded Age. We saw what this looked like the last time we left a Gilded Age. History doesn't need to, you know, it's not like it's going to unfold differently. Our recovery from all of this and our pathway forward is a climate justice one. It's about making sure that the jobs of the future are clean and green. It's literally not rocket science, but we've allowed the investment in our people and the investment in our places to be so hijacked as this heinous like I think Bill Barr called Portland like this, we're all these violent anarchists, and Donald Trump called us like a bee's nest of terrorists or something. And I'm like, have you seen us? We like plant gardens and ride bikes and start businesses and like print magazines here. So yeah, we're going to make it around the economy. You have to. It has to be around a just economy for your people, and making sure that your investments pay off for your people.
Well, what are some of the other big bullet points of your campaign policy-wise? What's
So
kind
the
of like
way we started out was that Green New Deal, that municipal Green New Deal. And what we did was we pulled the best of every Green New Deal that we saw going on around the world, these critical investments that we could make in the transition off the fossil fuel economy so that Portland has a sustainable economy. Ideally, that would be happening regionally. You know, we have the only directly elected regional government in the US here in Metro. But we really want to light a fire underneath them and get our region to have a sustainable economy. Second is rethinking public safety. So we have got to draw down that militarized police budget, stop wasteful spending on intensified militarization in our streets, and put that money to services where it's needed most. You know, Portland has a horrible history of excessive use of force from our police department. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars on munitions and tear gas, you know, with each week that passes, and millions of dollars in police overtime, even while we're in the middle of a COVID crisis and a homelessness crisis. So I want to see those resources reallocated toward community safety and well-being. Then we have to look at our housing crisis and the fact that Portland has a rapidly growing population. And what does it mean for us to rethink how even our city is zoned and how we use land? Do we need to convert some of our golf courses? Portland has 6 golf courses that are in the red. Do we need to restore those for human and nature habitats as opposed to recreation for just a few people with golf clubs? And then finally is a good government reform package where things like municipal broadband and ranked choice, you know, alternative voting models,
yes,
opening the ballot to non-naturalized citizens we can do at the municipal level. So immigrants and refugees can vote here. Thinking about district representation. Do we need to look at our city charter to make sure that people are more fairly represented in our city? I always call it the nuts and bolts part, but really it's at the core of what we're trying to do all the way back to Putnam. A healthy democracy is going to be the first responder in these trying times as we face these intersecting crises, and making sure our people are connected to each other, connected to decision making, completely empowered for disaster preparedness and climate response and crisis response, I believe is our number one duty as Portlanders for this next generation moving forward.
that I mean, yeah, that is, I think, completely what the agenda should be right now. You know, when you win, I'm going to move to Portland, and then if you don't keep these promises, I'm going to be really annoying. Just going to be honest, I'm going to be incredibly annoying if you don't keep these promises.
Well, again, the beauty of keeping or not keeping these promises is the broad-based coalition that it takes to get me elected. The Sightline Institute did a report that, historically, it's just been a few hundred people who make up the bulk of campaign finance contributions in the city. And so for too long, how we make policy has had to appease or satisfy them, right? Or even please them. And what we need to say is that is not how governance is going to go in the new world order, that healthy democracy is inclusive and it's representative. And right now, I'll just give you a good illustration. The timber baron, incumbent who has got a trust fund, and his wealth is his family was in the timber industry. He has like 100 new donors since the primary. Yesterday we did a count. I have 999 new donors. So it really changes the fundamental nature of how you're trying to do politics when you build that broad-based coalition, because it means I have to find a solution that's going to work for a really broad swath of people. And something like municipal broadband, it should check those boxes. Every family in Portland should want to solve the problems that solves. And I kind of don't have to care if Comcast gets mad at me because Comcast didn't elect me.
So I want to ask briefly then about your opponent. I don't know a ton about him, but I do know he had that moment where he got, he got tear gassed, and people didn't buy it. So give your thoughts on that.
Well, as someone who's been out there before him and will be out there long after him, I appreciate the effort. But this is really this lack of authenticity and this stunt making to score cheap points. It doesn't play. Especially, I have a daughter who's 20. If you've been on TikTok, it's a BS free zone, right? Like, people do not buy the lack of authenticity. They just don't want it. What they want is honest leaders they can trust. In some ways, Trump's base has been ride or die for him because they believe in his authenticity. I mean, even when he fails, he's still uniquely him, and his base trusts him to be that. I think on the left, we have to be a little bit more courageous about electing bold leaders who are authentic, who are honest, who are accountable and connected to the community. And when someone like him pulls that stunt, I don't believe it resonates with Portlanders because they know it's phony. Especially when he was out there decrying police violence on the part of the federal government, even as for months prior, his police had been perpetrating the exact same violence against protesters, and they now are perpetrating it again. So bookending that tear gassing stunt, his police were gassing people in the streets, and his police were still gassing people in the streets, and he never says a word about it. And he refuses to decry the violence in his own police. So any of us on the ground know that he's just kind of full of it on that front.
Well, are you going to get to debate him? Like what's kind of the anatomy in the city?
I believe we'll have a few debates. I mean, that's the beauty of Portland. We only have the Trailblazers, so when they're not playing, politics is our pro sports. Eventually. Oh, you laugh, but it's our reality here.
That's funny. Well, you guys are getting an MLS team, though, aren't you?
Yeah, that's true. I shouldn't say. No, we have very good soccer. I should not.
Oh, is it already there? I don't get to follow the MLS as much
soccer.
as.
We have the Timbers and the Thorns here, so I don't want to alienate them. It was more, we are not a place like Philadelphia where you've got hockey, NHL and NFL and ML. I mean, so Trailblazers and Timbers and Thorns. But other than that, we do a lot of politics as our pro sports, and we need to think about, I think, making sure that Wheeler is engaged in this. He's running a very laissez-faire campaign where he's not being held particularly accountable to the public for his failures. And I'm looking forward to debating him. I always love debating him because I'm not scared of him, but I think he's a little scared of me. So
that's a good thing to be. That's what you want. You want the incumbent to fear you.
Yeah. I want the status quo to fear me. And in fact, they really are, because I think that's one of the hardest things about renewing democracy is making sure that we are building people power and not just identity power. I don't want to be, a placeholder for the progressive politics. I want there to be more like Ada Colau in Barcelona. I don't know if you're following her municipalist movement at all, but what she's really done is tried to build a people's movement that's not about her, but it's about the platform. It's about the progressive politics, and it's about the community capacity building for that progressive change, because we should be able to trade out our leaders pretty effortlessly and still have the movements sustain themselves.
Well, I know you got a hard out at noon, so please take the last few minutes to plug anything else you want to mention regarding the campaign. And of course, remind everybody of where they can find you online.
Yeah, so my website is sarah2020.com. That's Sarah with an H, 2020.com. Folks can donate at my website. There's a donate button there. They can download and listen to my podcast and look through my policies. And by all means, stay in touch with my campaign if you've got ideas about how we can make those things better. Make sure you're donating to things like the Black Resiliency Fund here in Portland that are supporting our communities of color and Black Portlanders through this Black Lives Matter movement. There's a lot of good things going on the ground here in Portland, in addition to my campaign, that Portlanders are making sure that we are moving the needle on progressivism, even when our politicians have a hard time keeping up. So yeah, Sarah2020.com. Keep your eyes open for all the positive things going on in Portland, in addition to what I call the riot porn that comes out across mainstream media. And stay engaged where you are, because most importantly, like you said, all politics is local and we can all make a difference wherever we are.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for being here. It was really cool to talk to you, and we will definitely keep in touch. Absolutely. Best of luck to you.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Peace. Cool. There you go. She had a hard out. She had another appointment. So I wanted to let her off before I dismounted here. But yeah, Sarah Iannarone. She says it Iannarone. It's like me. It's like me where it's like technically it's Placone, but I just say Placone. You know, I think it's the same thing there. Sarah Iannarone, Sarah2020.com is her website. Sarah with an H 2020.com. And yeah, you know, if you want to take your community back, that's the way to do it. Get people like that in local office. So you know, especially if you're if you're up in Portland, Sarah2020.com. Please do check it out. All right, y'all. All right, that was today's episode. You know the drill. Lucy, where is she? She's running around somewhere. Yeah, but you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Oh, we have a Zoom show on Friday. There's going to be a Zoom show Friday. Graham Elwood, myself. Who else is going to be on that show, you ask? Steph Semerano, the Miserable Liberal, and Jimmy Dore. They're all going to be on that show. How do you get tickets for that show? You just Venmo Graham Elwood $5. It's just Graham-Elwood. Venmo $5. All proceeds are going to Fight for the Future, the digital rights organization that I've collaborated with before. All proceeds from the show are going to go to them. So it's supporting a good cause. You just Venmo Graham $5, and he will send you the Zoom link right before the show starts, and then he can hop in and join the show. And it's going to be Graham, myself, Steph Semerano, and Jimmy Dore. It's going to be a killer show. And if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, patreon.com/Ron Placone for a give what you can level. You get all kinds of cool stuff. You get my album that you can just download. You get full stand-up clips not available anywhere else. You get a patron Zoom show once a week. I do a Zoom show just for the patrons. And then I also do a patron stream once a week where the replay is only available on Patreon and I respond directly to the patrons. And I'm doing theme songs. Did you ever want your own theme song? I'll make one for you. I make theme songs for my patrons. They leave a comment. They say what they want it to be about. It's got to be about them, but it can be about their job or something they're interested in or, you know, stuff they like to do, whatever, about their relationship. I've gotten all that so far. So if you ever wanted your own theme song, patreon.com/Ron Placone. And again, it's one tier and it's pay what you can. So even if you just got an extra $1 a month, that goes a long way. So please, patreon.com/Ron Placone. Please help keep this show on the air. All right. You know the drill. Lucy says meow. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same channel. And until then, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace.